Welcome back everyone to the last video of this workshop series. This one is going to be on Slavic and North Germanic languages. By that I mean languages like Russian, Czech, Polish for the Slavic ones, and Norwegian, Swedish, etc. for the North Germanic languages. We're going to start out with some patterns and examples from words that come to English from Russian. There are approximately 500 words in Merriam-Webster's Third New International Unabridged that have Russian etymology. This also includes many words in English that also have French influence in addition to Russian influence because of various colonization efforts and cultural mixing that happened. These are some of the examples that I had in the summer workshop about images that you might think of that you might associate with these words that we have in English from Russian. But let's get started with some of these English words. The A sound in Russian words is usually spelled with either an A or an O. You have words like buran, a northeasterly wind, samizdat, a system in the Soviet Union, and sajen, a unit of length equal to 7 feet. All of these have the A for the A sound. In some cases you have words like droshki and domra, where you have an O sound, but it's usually not too hard of a distinction between the two vowels. In the E sound, you have an E. It's fairly simple. Words like Netman, a group of private traders, Lezginka, which is this dance. You have Dostoevskian, relating to Dostoevsky, the writer. You have a Slepets, which is a mole rat. In Russian, this literally means blind one. And Vertep, an early Russian puppet show. All these have the fairly simple E sound. One exception of this might be Dostoevskian, where you have that OE, and that's because it comes from this person's name. The E sound can have a couple different spellings. Usually you will have an I, like in Belina, and folk epic or ballad, and Safian, a leather made of goatskin or sheepskin. Those are the E sound in the middle of the word, and you just have an I for that. Occasionally you have words like sea catch. This is a grown male Alaskan fur skin. This is slightly different, and so is the etymology, and so that one has an EE for the C sound. And then, sometimes when you have the E sound at the end, partially because of how the transliteration occurs, when you're converting, say, Cyrillic characters into the English transliterations, this turns into a Y. It's more of a longer E sound. So Perwitsky has a Y at the end. For a couple extra words, consider the word bituk and sea catch. A bituk is a kind of heavy Russian draft horse, and sea catch is over here. The O sound and the A sound, like the hard A as opposed to the A as before, both of these are usually spelled with the letter O. You have words like Lysenkoism, a biological doctrine, Pavlovian, relating to Ivan Pavlov and his experimentation, Bogatyr, one of the legendary medieval heroes of Russia, Orlov, a Russian breed of trotting horses, Stroganoff, the food, and Chernozem, a type of soil. Most of these have that O, where it's over here in red or purple. One of the exceptions here is Chernozem, where, again, because of the way that it's transliterated, it looks like it should be pronounced Chernozem, but it's actually Chernozem. Make sure to know this word because it's interesting, both definition-wise. It's a very fertile type of soil that leads to crops growing pretty well, and for the fact that it has that sort of tricky pronunciation spelling combination. The U sound is generally going to have a U, and the I is going to have an AI. Nothing too tricky here. You have words like gudak, an old 3-stringed Russian instrument, kulak, a prosperous or wealthy peasant farmer, and shuba, a Russian fur or fur-lined coat. Those all have the U, the letter U, for the U sound. Then you have words like saiga, which is a sheep-like antelope. It's quite an interesting animal if you look at its snout. It's suggested that this might perhaps help it to breathe in either cold and snowy or dusty desert regions. You have a nagaika, a thick, tightly twisted whip, and a balalaika, a usually 3-string instrument with a triangular body. All of these have the I sound being spelled with an AI. The schwa sound, depending on the particular usage, can have a couple different vowels there, but usually you should be able to determine this based on the word itself. Let's take a look at one of the exceptions, holluschik. This is a type of fur seal, a young male fur seal, and this one has Hollus. The chick is nothing too complicated, it's just CHICK. But this is mostly the exception. In most other cases, you have words like Pavlova, where you have an A at the end for the schwa. You have tokamak, which is a toroidal device for producing nuclear fusion. You have a bandura, which is a stringed instrument of the lute class. You have purga, and a theremin, which is a musical instrument that you actually control without touching it. You just hold your hands above the metal electrodes and it makes this creepy, wavy sound. And then for the k sound, you can have either a K or occasionally a KH. The K is usually in the simpler parts of words, like knez, a Slavic prince or duke, pika, any of the animals, not to be confused with pika, the food sort of condition where you eat substances that you generally shouldn't eat. That one has a C. Kibitka, which is a circular tent made of lattice work, and chistka, a political purge. In some other cases, usually when they come from names, you can often have a KH. Again, transliteration issue, that's something that you would be able to hear in the original words. Chekhovian has a KH from Anton Chekhov, Stakhanovite, a worker, and Baruxi, a breed of dog. All of these have the KHs. It's hard to hear in American English, so keep that in mind and know the situations where that pops up. Only these 3 words have a KH. The other ones are all Ks. The T sound, another consonant that's fairly simple here. If you have a T, spell it with a T. A knout is a flogging whip. A sterlet is a sturgeon. It's used for caviar. A kaftan is an ankle-length garment. And agitprop is propaganda that agitates. All of these just have the simple T sound with a simple T spelling. Don't overcomplicate these words. Now, for the West Slavic language branch, if you move over to this side, you have languages like Czech and Polish that have come into English. These are words like redowa, kolachki, which is a type of pastry, a bun made of rich sweet dough. If you've ever seen kolaches, it seems to be kind of a Texas thing. That was actually made when Czech and Polish immigrants settled in Texas and created shops selling these pastries. It's the Americanized word. That one's actually not in the dictionary, but kolachki is. Sokol, a member of Slavic gymnastic societies, and dumka, an Eastern European folk ballad. Over here, all of these dumka, kolachki, sokol, the K sound is spelled with a K the same way. Naprapathy, a therapeutic system. Redowa, that schwa and the A is spelled with that A. Hachek is one of the interesting words where there's actually an accent on the C, but you don't spell that when you're in the spelling bee, so make sure that you spell that ch sound with just one C, not an H or anything else. Here are some words that are from Polish. They're not super common, but the ones that we do have are quite interesting for use as spelling bee words, because they often have letter combinations like in Rędzina. That's a j sound pretty much in the American pronunciation, but it's spelled with a dzina. Tricky combination, keep that in mind, learn these words. A babka is a glazed sweet bread. Krakowiak, a Polish, usually group folk dance. Oberek, a Polish folk dance characterized by acrobatics. Zubrowka, a straw-colored Russian liqueur, and grosz, a Polish monetary unit. So take a look at all these interesting letter combinations, like how you have the sh sound in grosz with the sz, the v in Krakowiak with a w. Most other cases, like the k and the other consonants, are just straightforward. As long as these somewhat strange-sounding consonant patterns are down, you're good for the rest. Now, taking us over to the North Germanic part, we have around 300 words in the English dictionary that have Norwegian origins. These include words like rosemaling, painted or carved decoration as in furniture, rorqual, a family of large baleen whales, kraken, the sea monster, and then lefse, a type of pancake served buttered and folded, and then take a look at these two words, gamelost and nøkkelost. These both have that L-O-S-T at the end, but if you ignore the L for a second, the root O-S-T, or ost, means cheese. So you have different prefixes that act as modifiers that describe the type of cheese, but apart from that, all of these ost words are going to be different types of cheeses. Gamelost is a Norwegian blue mold cheese. It comes from gammel, meaning old, so literally old cheese. And nøkkelost is a dark cheese that has a lot of spices. From nøkkel, meaning key, it used to be modeled after cheese from Holland that used to be marked with crossed keys as like a sort of stamp. Some other words, as you can imagine, Norway is up by the ocean, in the very northern latitudes. So you have words like floe, floating ice in a large sheet on the surface of the ocean, skijoring, a winter sport where a person is drawn over snow by a horse or a vehicle, krill, planktonic crustaceans, you know, the little organisms that whales eat, boig, a formless or pervasive obstacle. You might think this is a typo for boy, but B-O-Y-G is actually that type of obstacle. Bergelt, also called a rosefish, it's a large marine food fish that's bright red. And leister, a spear with 3 or more barbed prongs for catching fish. Just some interesting words that you can know. There aren't too many of these Norwegian words, but they usually have good meanings, and so they're good fodder for spelling bee words. And some words from Icelandic and Danish. Icelandic and Danish words include things like glima, a wrestling technique when you throw an opponent on the floor on their back. Skyr, if you've been in the yogurt section of the grocery store, it's more popular recently. We've had Icelandic skyr in American markets. It's a kind of Icelandic yogurt, essentially. Flens, to strip a whale of blubber or skin. Take care with that SE at the end of the word. And speaking of interesting combinations, take a look at this one. It looks like marmenil, it means a merman, but it's actually pronounced marmenitla. So be careful with that very last 2 consonants. There are no T's in this word, even though you might hear the T in the pronunciation. You have Arir, a unit of money. That has an EY instead of just a simple consonant. Harpoon is a word that's more familiar to us. And here you have Jökull, an Icelandic mountain covered with ice. This is often a root, the mountain root, that occurs in other proper names of mountains, like, for example, the volcanoes that are exploding. In Icelandic, you'll often have these sort of consonants that in the spelling don't make the same sound when they're pronounced. So learn these words and take a note of all these interesting consonant patterns. Danish words include words like fjell, a barren plateau of the Scandinavian upland. There's that FJ that you should know. If you notice that this seems similar to the veld that you had in, for example, Dutch and Afrikaans, that's because all these languages are of the Germanic branch, so they share those roots that eventually led you to field in English. Here, because it's so northern, it's a snow-covered barren plateau. Havarti is a kind of semi-soft Danish cheese. Kierkegaardian means of or relating to. this person, the Danish philosopher Kierkegaard. Ebliskeven is a muffin-shaped pastry. There you have that eh sound that has the tricky AE, as well as a VE for the V sound. An interesting word, it's kind of complicated, cool stuff to know. Bilberry is a kind of berry, berry plus bill. And then over here you have appetitus, a soft Danish cheese. It's like appetite cheese, basically. And skål, a toast to someone's health. Make a note of that OAL. You might not notice that the first time around. With Swedish, here are a couple words that we have in English from Swedish. Words like chili, frozen ground. There's a ch that is spelled with a TJ, as well as an A that's spelled with an AE. Harfang, a snowy owl. Imagine the one in Harry Potter. That's an FANG, don't complicate that one. A riksdaler, an old Swedish dollar, similar to the German Reichstaler, Reichssthaler, which also might remind you of the Dutch Rijksdaalder. Similar words, they come from similar roots, but they're spelled in different ways in English, depending on what language they came from. Alstroemeria here is a kind of flour. Smorgasbord is a luncheon or supper buffet with a variety of foods. Desman is an aquatic insectivorous mammal of Russia that resembles a mole, but it like burrows in the water. It's kind of cool. And sievert, a unit for doses of radiation. Take a note of that IE over there. It's not just an E or an EE, it's an IE. Now, these are a couple words between these various languages that can be quite confusing because they sound very similar. For example, these are three words, ria, ria, and ria. One is from Swedish, it's RYA, it's a Scandinavian hand-woven rug. One's RHEA, that one went from Greek to Latin to New Latin. And this one is a kind of flightless South American bird. And then you have ria coming from Spanish, a long, narrow river, basically. Think Rio, and ria as the diminutive of Rio. Learn these words, be able to apply the definition and the languages of origin to what the spelling is going to actually be. And then you have four words, sissel, 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 and sissel. They sound exactly the same, but they have completely different etymologies and definitions. The first sissel over here went from Russian to Polish to Czech to German. That's S-I-S-E-L. It's a kind of squirrel. You have sisal in Mexican Spanish. This is a kind of fiber, a strong fiber that's used to make twine. You have sisal, from Latin to French, that's S-C-I-S-S-E-L. That's metal scrap clippings, think like scissor and stuff that's been cut out. And you have sisal, S-Y-S-S-E-L, and that one is an Icelandic administrative district. This is just an example of where you can actually apply these languages of origin and definitions to help you remember which spelling it is when you're faced with one of these words at a spelling bee. That brings us to the conclusion of not just this workshop, but of this entire series as a whole. If you watched all the videos, I hope you really enjoyed them and I hope they were helpful. As always, if you have any questions, let me know and I'll do my best to help you. But thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.